Let Your Heart Grow podcast is a place for anyone who wants room at the table and is ready to open themselves to seeing the world a little bit differently. Now it's time to let your heart grow. Hello, friends. This is Allison, and I actually have a good friend of mine, Katie Hughes, here with us today. Katie and I go back quite a ways. We went to East High School together here in Salt Lake City, and we have kind of been connecting a little bit more this past year. And I'm so honored that Katie is taking time out of her schedule to be able to sit and have this conversation. So one of the things that when we were trying to decide what we wanted to talk about, I had an experience, and I shared a little bit of this with Katie, but I feel like I'll share some here. Katie was one of those people. So in high school, I kind of struggled a lot with self-doubt and just the way I viewed myself due to some of my life circumstances. And Katie was always someone that I admired a lot and respected. And she was always so kind, but I always really admired her and wanted to be more like you. And I remember, just following your story for years, when you and Phil got married and the kids, and then you shared a post, I think it was about 2 years ago, how you struggled with the way you viewed yourself until you had your bridal pictures. You'd never felt beautiful. You'd never felt attractive in that way. And it resonated with me because I was like, Katie's the person I thought was just beautiful and kind and all the stuff you wanted to be. So that kind of hit me that I feel like everybody has a little bit of that inside them. I think it's a very natural part of being a woman, especially, but even men. And so since then, Katie and I've talked a little bit about that. And I thought, if someone like Katie and someone like me has struggled with this, what are others dealing with? And you've raised 3 daughters. 2 are out of the house. I have 2 young daughters. How do you feel as we start this discussion, is this something that the girls nowadays are still dealing with? And what do we as women, as mothers, and as adults want to pass on to our children so that they don't have to experience it the way that we did?
I love this discussion. First of all, Allison, thank you so much for having me on. It means the world. And I've loved the reconnecting. It just means so much that you would reach out and be able to have this discussion with me. I love these conversations because they're so real, and we can connect in ways that feel like it's deeply personal. And I love that it was that post that drew you in, when really, truly, I have struggled my whole life with self-worth, and with maybe the best way to put this is just the views of the world. I always felt a little different, with all my high school friends. They were beautiful cheerleaders and dancers. And I always just did not feel like I kind of measured up to them, but I knew I had a good personality.
Very much so.
That was kind of like my saving grace. But I remember not really feeling beautiful according to the ways of the world until I had these pictures done of my bridals. And I finally felt like, oh, that's a pretty picture of me. And it's so sad because I look back and I think this is probably a very real feeling that many girls feel, many women feel. And I knew I was a daughter of God. And I don't know why I had that, but it is something that has been in my heart my whole life, and was fostered by my mother and father, who helped me know that, helped me see that. And so it was nurtured into me, but it was also the nature of who I was. I knew who I was. And even though I maybe didn't feel as beautiful as I had hoped, I knew I had worth. And I knew there was something about my divine identity. And for me, I feel like that if it doesn't come naturally, we have to teach it. We 100% have to teach it. And I do very much feel like, as a mother and in raising girls and boys, I also have this in my boys, we have to teach divine identity. We absolutely do. And we have to teach this and continue to testify of it to them as we're loving them and being the parents, and mom or father or both, that we are hoping to be for our children.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that because my background, I mean, my mom was a single mom working, and we joined the church when I was 8, but it wasn't something I think that was instilled in quite the same way. Like we didn't have that spiritual component around worth. And that's something that I've been finding over the last, like in my 40s, that I've been discovering in the past 2 years. Like I've heard it in institute, I heard it in seminary, I heard it from teachers, but it didn't resonate inside of me until recently. Mm-hmm. And it has completely changed my life. And I think that really is the key, is that the ability to see ourselves in a way that we know who we are, and we find our individual purpose, our individual worth, our individual component that brings us into this world with our gifts and things that we offer the world. You and I both have spent time on social media. I have seen a lot of people wanting, like we have influencers, and there's a beauty in that. But sometimes I think we compare, even as adults. We see what, like kind of what I was doing with you when I was younger, is you want to be what somebody else is. And I feel personally that a lot of when you realize who you are, what you bring to the table is such an important part of this discussion. Like for me, I was diagnosed with ADHD about 1.5 years ago. That knowledge helped me understand who I was. And so instead of always pointing out my faults to myself, I was like, oh, well, that's just part of who I am. So let's look at what this does. And that has opened me to stop comparing.
Yes.
And being like, well, I'm broken because I'm not like this person or that person. Yes. And it's also allowed me to embrace who I am.
Yes.
I was reading something this morning. I was telling Katie before we started that whenever I'm preparing for this podcast, I'm amazed at the things that appear. And I came across this quote, and I just want to share it. It's from Patricia T. Holland, who is the wife of Jeffrey R. Holland of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Authorities. And she says, our Heavenly Father, our Father in heaven needs us as we are growing to become. He has intentionally made us different from one another so that even with our imperfections, we can fulfill his purposes. My great misery comes when I feel I have to fit what others are doing or what I think others expect of me. I am most happy when I'm comfortable being me and trying to do what my Father in heaven and I expect me to be. I think that's a beautiful quote. She talks about how she's very, very quiet, and then her husband is very outgoing and boisterous and bubbly, is how she described it. And so she tried to be that bubbly person. Yeah. And she's like, I'm not Jeff Holland. Like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And like in your situation, like you have discovered some gifts that you've been given in your life. And we've talked about that. Like one of your gifts is gathering. And you often say that love is in the details. And it's something that's resonated with me. My question for you is, how often do you spend the details and take the time to intentionally be aware of yourself and show love to yourself?
That's such a great question. And, I feel like I'm still practicing how to do that. So I think it's one of those things that we have to practice. I think it's one of those things that we have to discover. I mean, here I am at 45 and I still don't really have it figured out, but I do have a few things figured out. And one thing I know is I'm really drawn to authenticity. I'm really drawn to realness and genuine connection and sharing. And you were talking, about influencers, and I think we have to be so careful with that word. I mean, regardless, we are being influenced for worse or for better all the time. And I've often thought in my mind, if I ever do anything, I want to be influencing for the better. But just by the nature of myself, I mean, I am good at a lot of things, and I do know that about myself. I've kind of been a jack of all trades, master of none, but I have it in me to like try something and just do it, and it will come off as really great in lots of ways. And it's not the best out there, but it's something I've had to be thoughtful about, because not everyone has that or feels that, and then they can be totally 100%. What's that word? Just like they shy away from me. They are
maybe they feel intimidated. Or they feel...
That is the word. They feel intimidated, and I don't ever want to be that way.
No.
But just by the nature of maybe what I do and how I do it, and my own excellence and joy and talent, I do that. And I don't ever want to be that way. So I guess what I want to say is I feel like there's such power in vulnerability and in showing our raw self. Like it's come down to this. Like when we know people's stories, we love each other better. So when I found out your story, Allison, even all the stories you've ever shared with me about your personal life, about growing up, about ADHD, about your foster experience, about raising these girls and the things you're navigating, I am so drawn to you in a way that feels vulnerable and loving and caring. And when we know each other's stories, we love each other better and we start to see the divine identity. And so the more we share that raw self, not sometimes it's scary to share that way, but when we can extend in a way that feels reachable, it opens a doorway of divine identity. People start to see you who you really are, that you're imperfect and that we're all imperfect and that we're all striving and trying to grab a hold of who we really are, And I remember that post you're talking about, and it was a few years ago. And what it was an image of myself, throwing up an image of myself and how I was pretty much paralyzed putting up this image of myself. And yet that I felt like I've just never felt that I had, this sense of like beauty in myself. And that was totally a physical thing, but it really comes down to like what's in our heart.
It is. Yeah. It's just,
And I do feel like that was a highly liked post because why? It was raw, it was genuine, it was authentic, it was imperfect, and it showed
people connected to it. They felt she's like me.
Exactly.
And we live in a world right now, like we're talking about self-worth, but there is a lot of divisiveness in our society and the world as a whole. And I feel like one of the things that I've learned, especially the past couple of years, and through my foster care journey, because I've met people that I probably never would have met in another way, that we're all more alike than we realize.
Oh.
There's details in the stories that are different, and there's situations that happen, and but we're all striving for the same thing in the long run.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like being vulnerable and opening ourselves up, it allows others also to see pieces of who you are and where you. Nobody online, none of those people that we admire or we see has a perfect story. And I one time, so I have judged myself very harshly as a parent. Being raised, I wanted the white picket fence, and I wanted because I moved in the military my whole growing up years. I wanted to have the house and the home and the family, like the picture perfect family that you hear about. And my life has been anything but that.
Yeah.
And I don't regret any of it because I'm so blessed. But what I've learned is that when I am open about, so like I take my mothering story, people have told me, oh, you're a foster parent, you must be like an angel or a saint, or you must be so patient. And I was like, no, I yell at my kids. Like they would say I'm the meanest mom in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
And one day I decided to open up on one of my posts about parenting and how I yelled at my kids and I had done these things. And I've been kind of open about some other experiences with people. And I've had so many people write me and say, I love how imperfectly perfect you are as a mom.
Yes.
And I think that's it. Is like people as moms, we put all this pressure on ourselves. As I think parents in general, because I know dads that do this too. And we belittle ourselves when we mess up. Well, the fact is these kids don't come with a manual, but we have certain gifts that God has given us, and He's entrusted us with these beautiful spirits. And we just do our best every day, and we say sorry when we mess up.
Yep.
And we be there for the other moms that are struggling and going through those same things.
Yeah.
And I think the vulnerability is a really big part of it. And the other thing, I love that you use the word authentic, because I think when we are ourselves, like the true self, because it's honest. It's the ability to just be who you are. And you know what I have found out recently? I'm funny. Like I've had friends who are like, you're so funny. And I'm like, because I'm comfortable and I'm just relaxing with you. But I'm actually way more funny than I thought I was. So I think, and so I'm finding by being myself, I'm finding other gifts that I have that I didn't know about.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. And one thing I want to lean into a little bit is that people might look at me and say I've got that white picket fence dream, and they can look at that, but you know what? I still struggle and have challenges, and we can still have that like idyllic thing, and our story looks so different. And And I think it's really a practice in loving each other better and not
Yes.
judging each other and giving each other grace and the benefit of the doubt as we're working to raise kids because we're still discovering who we are. Like I'm still discovering, I'm still trying to figure out what motivates me, what helps me be a good mom, or what helps me desire to be a good wife, or even do my own self reflection, my own self, like, I don't know, things that help build myself, like my physicality or those types of things. Like, I just feel like we're constantly trying to discover that. And I think that's the quest of a lifetime.
It
I've
is.
just decided we are just on the quest of a lifetime, discover who we are. But the sooner we know that we are all brothers and sisters
Mhm.
of a God who loves us deeply and who gave us these unique, innate gifts of creating and loving and caring and all these things. And then in the end, that's almost all we need as we're still
Mhm.
discovering ourselves because it's like the one thing that tethers us to him.
Yes. I really love the visual in a way of like of a table and everybody
Mm,
coming into the table. And because that's something like I've been thinking a lot about lately.
mm,
And I think I like the idea of what you said, grace and to process. It's like we always talk about how we're working toward perfection. And the
mm,
thing is, perfection is something that none of us are ever going to fully achieve here on this earth.
mm.
But the Allison that I was 20 years ago is a different Allison than I am today. And I hope in 20, 30 years or whatever down the road, when my life is coming to an end, that Allison is a different person too. My mantra for my personal life is I want to be better today than I was yesterday.
I
Did I
love that.
learn from whatever I went through?
Mhm.
And that's what I'm hoping to pass on to my children is like, you work hard, you just try to always be better than you were before. And if
Mhm.
you mess up, you say sorry. I think that's really the key. One of the things that I think that we do in the world that I heard somebody say recently is we look at our worth as a result of achievement.
Mm.
So, like, because when you're young, you get an award at school, you get an award in sports, but that's not what it is. Like, our worth is ingrained in us. We
Mm.
come with worth,
Yeah.
we come with value. We are the ones who dispute that. We like fight it. And I remember there was a day I used to take the bus to work every day and go home. And I was sitting on the bus and we had parked to let people on. And there was a gentleman, not someone that most of us would probably want to talk to, just was very unkept,
Yeah.
very, a little scary, to be honest, in his
Yeah.
looks. And I remember sitting there and just having this thought. I don't know where it came from, probably from up above, that said, I bet he's beautiful to somebody.
Mm.
That while he scared me, that like he made you like intimidated or whatever the word would be, I was just like, I bet you there's someone like his mother thought he was beautiful, or maybe he's married. And one of the things that I've learned is that we all have beauty and we all have, like you said, worth. And that is something I think is also the key that can help us in loving others and
Mm.
ourselves. We might view ourselves as broken. We might view ourselves as ugly, as our body type is not the way that we would want it to be, but that somebody else might be looking at us and thinking the opposite. Like I was looking at you, like I thought you were beautiful and outgoing, and you were student body officers and you did all these things, and I was the band geek, and while the whole time you were feeling the same way that I was feeling. And so sometimes I think that it goes the other way too. That
Mm.
when we meet people, that we take the time to stop and think, what have they been through in their lives? Like, look, walk in their moccasins, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so I think it's important, first off, that we remember that when we meet somebody, that we should remember that they've had their experiences, that they may approach life in a different way because they've been through something different than you.
Yes. Yes.
So while talking about showing love to ourselves, we can show love to others, but then also expecting that in return.
I
That
love
if somebody doesn't treat you well, so I'm going to use kids because you can forgive them for their shortcomings.
that.
But my kids are like we were on a trip recently, and when I was changing into my swimsuit, and one of my daughters went out of her way to talk about how large I was, and
Mm.
it's something that I was already struggling with, and it was very sensitive, and it really hurt. And I remember just like I wanted to react in a negative way, and I didn't yell or anything, but it hurt. And so I was like, we're not going to go to the beach. We're going to stay here and mom's going to take some time for herself. And I remember later, like sitting down with them, because I could tell that they were upset at me. Like, you're so mean. You won't let me go. I wanted to give them love and grace back because they're human. They're figuring it out. But I went to them and I said, you know what? This is something mommy struggles with and mommy feels bad about. You are the people I love the most in the world. And what you said hurt me. And they were like, well, we didn't want to hurt you. And I was like, I know that, but I demanded of them. I am important. I'm a beautiful daughter of God. I need you to treat me as such. And so I put boundaries in place. And I think that's part of it too, is we have the tendency to allow others to also hurt us and be critical of us. And so I think sometimes we need to demand the respect, the love, the value in who we are.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I don't think that's talked about very much. I think that boundary part, and I can relate on so many levels. And what a beautiful teaching moment with your girls. I just think that will go distance far beyond you can imagine, that they'll remember that you sat down with them and had that exchange with them, and I keep thinking about, what you had said about the man who you were like, I bet he's beautiful to someone. I know that thought came from heaven above, and we call it the Spirit, and the Spirit can turn things around in our heart and in our mind to teach us and remind us. And I think there's so much more to the Spirit than we allow ourselves, because the Spirit can teach us all things. The Spirit can remind us of all things. And there's something about, as we seek to live a holy life and live close to God, we can know that we have access to that Spirit. Actually, everybody has the Spirit of Christ on this earth. So whether or not you're a baptized member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we all have access to this Holy Spirit, which can teach us all things, right? Yeah. And I just love, there's a really neat quote from Sherry Dew about divine identity, and I just found it. I love it. The Spirit testifies who you really are. So listen to this. There is nothing more vital to our success and our happiness here than learning to hear the voice of the Spirit. It is the Spirit who reveals to us our identity, which isn't just who we are, but who we have always been. And then when we know, our lives take on a sense of purpose so stunning that we can never be the same again. Our spirits long for us to remember the truth about who we are, because the way we see ourselves, our sense of identity, affects everything we do. It affects the very way we live our lives. So today I invite you to ponder in a new way, not just who you are, but who you have always been. So Sherry Dew has such a beautiful concept, because when we know who we are, we have that Spirit also that reminds us who others are. And back to that boundary thing, I think it's so critical, because when we know who we are and remember who we are, then we don't let people trample all over us. We don't let one thing they say determine who we really are. And it's a hard world out there. There's a rough world and lots of messages being sent our way. But if we can come back to that truth and trust that the Spirit will teach us all things and remind us who we are, then we are totally going to win every battle in the end of who, when we're struggling and trying to figure out, who we are and how we feel about ourselves. In the end, we can win every battle with that knowledge.
Oh, I love that. Because that's really what we're dealing with. There's a battle that we're fighting every day. Get out of bed. It's like there's that funny little quote that says, I want to be where I get out of bed and Satan says, not her. Oh no, she's up. And that's kind of the idea. Like every time I read that, it's like a little chuckle, but I think it's so true, because we live in a world right now where things have like modified in our society, and it's modified who we are. We have, various dependencies. We have like people's brains are literally different than they once were. Yeah. And self-doubt and depression and anxiety are such a huge part of every individual's lives. There's so few people that are not impacted in some way from themselves, somebody in their lives. Yeah. And Satan uses these tools to come after us. But if we allow ourselves to put the boundaries in place and say, well, that's their opinion, that I'm not going to let that come after me.
Yeah.
And keep that, because it's like this voice that sometimes like goes on repeat in your head.
Yeah.
And so when we say, no, I'm not going to let that play. I'm just like we say, I'm not going to watch this kind of show, or I'm not going to put myself in this situation. We can say, I'm not going to let that go through my armor. And I do think that's so true. And the other thing to go with that I have learned recently. So I work at a college, and there's people of all ages, and I'll be like going to the bathroom and I'll see somebody. And I've learned, if I see, like, I think somebody looks beautiful that day, or their smile isn't, I tell them. And I have had people literally almost fall over and be like, oh, thank you. And I've had others come back, like they'll like go to the restroom and they come back out and they're like, that really helped me today. And so sometimes I think when we see people that we think, oh, they look really pretty, or, oh, that's such a beautiful smile, whatever it is, like, oh, your shirt is gorgeous, like that, we let them know that we're noticing them, that we recognize them. Because I think it's easy. I've heard so many people be like, I feel so alone, or I feel so insignificant, or whatever it is. And I think a lot of it is we're so busy in our lives. Like, we get so wrapped up in raising our families, working our jobs, taking care of our homes, that it's not that we don't love people or we don't care, but we just get wrapped up in busy. And so I have tried really hard, especially when I'm not with my children because they're very distracting, but that I go walking out into the world, I try to look at what's around me, because one, I think it does help them, but also it allows me to learn. It allows the spirit to draw that from those things. And I become a better person from it. And so I think that's so important. Now, one thing that I've noticed on your social media is that you went to Walmart and you met Ty. Now, I have to ask, how did you start talking to him? And this is off topic a little bit, but I think it kind of applies. So Ty looks like maybe he has a form of a disability of some form, but he seems so kind and like such a good heart. How did that experience come about?
Yeah. So let me first tell you something before all your listeners don't understand this about you, Allison, is that person in the bathroom that is communicating kindness has always been there. That's the Allison I've always known. And we connected because of kindness. Light attracts light. And I just feel like that's who you are. And it's always been who you are. And I remember you being such an easy friend because of the love and because of the extending and the kindness. And that really is who you are. And you are so good at practicing this love and that sees people, that it just means so much. And so much that how many years later, 20 something years later, that we can connect and still feel that love and that light and that extending to one another. And it's a beautiful thing. With Ty, I'll be honest, my very first interaction with him was at this yogurt shop, and he kind of made me nervous. And I was with all my kids, and I just was like, oh, this is a little interesting. We'll see how this goes. And anyway, I decided in that moment, this is my chance to teach my kids. This is my chance to teach what it looks like to interact with someone with special needs that might be a little scary. And we made friends with Ty in that moment collectively. And I've probably seen him a dozen times since then. And I just, to this day, feel comfortable talking to him because we broke that barrier. And I'll be honest, I have to have a couple of boundaries with Ty, but like, there it is again, like there's something about that boundary of like, I'm able to extend myself in this way. And I want to be full love all the time. And I know he feels that, but I'm just saying more like a boundary with him, just because he can kind of cross the lines. He always wants to look at my wallet. He always wants to hold hug me really close. And sometimes he squeezes me too hard and all of that. But he also knows that I love him and care for him and genuinely want to know how he is. And he knows every time I'm going to want to take a selfie with him and we're going to want to have this conversation. And I've given him rides home, and he's just a great kid, and everyone loves Ty. And I think what has happened from it is because I've just posted about it. I don't I think I posted once about him, but I have shared whenever I spy Ty on my Instagram stories. And what's happened is when I do that, people that are in my area say, "Oh, I finally had the courage to go up to Ty because you did that." Or I've known Ty since he was, this old, and we got past that, and now he's our special friend too, and it's not just me that's doing that, but I think I'm working to model what it looks like to love, and I feel like in turn that helps me have confidence in who I am, and I am someone who can love Ty and show that love, and that gives me worth and helps remind me we are just spirit children and with these different bodies, and one day Ty will be perfected, and I hope he gives me one of the biggest squeezes ever in heaven when we go beyond.
And that's kind of why I brought that up, because it kind of came to my mind after we were talking about, like, you see somebody that might not be what you consider the norm of whatever, like that. But every time, like every picture I've seen of you with him, he always has this beautiful smile, and you could tell he has light too. So I think it kind of goes to that concept, is to this worth discussion that we're having, is we don't all fit in a box. And I'm so grateful that we don't fit in a box. That's how the world is so beautiful, because of all those differences. And I think that Ty is a pure example of what we can teach our children, that there is room at the table for each person. Even now, we are not meant to get along with every person on this earth, but we can be kind. We can be loving, but it doesn't mean that we have to be best friends or acquaintances. And I think that's important to remember, because I remember when I didn't get along with somebody, because like you said, I do love people. I felt bad about myself. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I? And I think it's important. There's millions of people that have ever lived on this earth, and there's a reason there's been wars. There's a reason there's been all these different things. But I think the lesson in that is to learn from it. And so we can be kind to people, but we don't have to let them into our lives in a way that they can open a wound.
And that's that boundary thing that you were talking about. I mean, we really, when we also understand who we are, we also know what we can and can't navigate, and I think part of that is like, it's just learning. It's learning. I mean, like you said, we just kind of have to figure it out as we go. And like, when we know better, we do better type thing. And sometimes you have to be crushed. You have to be crushed by people. I know that sounds horrible, but we really do have to have an experience of being hurt for us to realize we don't want to treat people that way. We don't want to be that way. And we don't want to put ourselves in a position like that to be hurt. And I think when we're clear on who we are, and like the spirit can guide us to know, it might have just been that one chance, and that's what it was. And then the spirit will tell us. And then, but oftentimes I'm reminded that sometimes we have to learn lessons twice and three times, because and that's part of the practicing and figuring it out and navigating all that we need to, but I do think there is such power in understanding that. And like you said, giving yourself the grace to learn and to be reminded of things, and just to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes, and there's going to be a process of discovering who we are and what we can and can't allow into our lives, when it comes to that.
That actually makes me think. There was a talk in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have a general conference twice a year where we hear from our leaders that gives us insights and stuff to be better. And one of the sisters spoke, and I'd never heard her speak before. And her talk was about like letting the Savior more in our lives. But what resonated with me that I think goes with what we're discussing is she talked about how she has worn glasses for a long time, and she had these cute little leopard printed ones on. So they, of course, stood out. And my daughter loves leopards. So I was like, oh, Carol would love those. But she started talking about how for her glasses are a tool that helps her get through her day. Like until she puts those on, she can be confused or whatever, but it gives her clarity. And so it helps clarify things. It gives her focus, and it helps her. And I think that we have that tool in the spirit, as you've been talking about. It's a tool that can give us clarity. It's a tool that gives us focus. It gives us discernment. And we are so blessed that through the scriptures and through prayer and through the spirit, we can know, like, what is it that we're going through and experiencing that maybe this is a lesson we need right now.
Yeah.
There's a quote, I think it was by Joseph Smith Jr., where he's like a rough stone, and he rolls down the hill, and the it like smooths it off as the pieces break off.
Yeah.
And isn't that kind of what it is? Is the one constant we have in our lives is change.
Mm.
And the one thing that we can always expect is that things are going to happen. And so one of the things that I've learned, so I have really come to relate with butterflies the last 2 years. It started with the ADHD, but I have seen so much. They are a creature that transforms through a physically demanding process. And so when we go through the trials, whatever they are, it could be infertility, it could be job loss, it could be a death of a spouse or a child. I've had friends go through so many different things. I think it's really important to remember that we're going to go through challenges. It's what we do with the challenge and our ability to learn from them. And because if we didn't go through hard, we wouldn't appreciate the sunny days.
Yes.
And I think that's the key.
Well, and that butterfly thing analogy is really awesome if you think about it. I mean, I'm so glad that God created butterflies, because you look at a caterpillar and you're like, what a sludgy little thing, pudgy, sludgy little thing. Yeah, grubby thing. And then to look at a butterfly and the beauty and the joy and the transformation and the process of all of that is fascinating. And I love that thought of that we are in a process of discovering. We're in the process of, and you said, like, it goes through a pretty rigorous physical thing, which might mean for us, not just our bodies, but our heart and our mind is going to go through a lot of hard, painful things. But the hope is that we become butterflies, right? And that we get to have this freedom to fly and be beautiful and all of that, and I love that, connection, because we're really in the process of becoming, and there's power in discovering that and knowing that. And it actually makes me want to dig in a little deeper and be okay with the process, because I trust that the Lord will make me perfect in the end.
One of the things I kind of want to make sure we address a little bit, because I think it's such an important topic that more people are talking about, but I think we're not good at, is self-care and being intentional in showing love to ourselves. Like, you and I are gatherers. We're really good at making sure if our children need something, we're caretakers. We want to make sure that they have what they need, that they feel valued, loved, cared for during those good and bad times. But I know for myself that I tend to let myself get depleted or worn out just because I'm taking care of everyone else. How do you think that we could maybe be more intentional or aware so that we show love to ourselves?
I think it's so important. And I like to think about the story of Mary and Martha, and how one is in that gathering moment. She is trying to make everything just right for the Savior. And then the other is just at his feet, right? And I think the one that is at his feet is just, it's so powerful, because she knows that the best thing she could possibly do is stop everything and glean from him at that moment. And the other one is just in the hope of creating, being about her house, trying to create a place of gathering, which is so important. But I love the thought of creating the space for us to be able to sit at the Savior's feet and really, truly, intentionally choose to stop, rest, listen, whatever we need. So I like that story from the scriptures. But when it comes to everyday life, I think about the power of the rest and the stillness. And I think we have to be comfortable being in those quiet spaces of just being ourselves. It's taken me a little bit of time to feel comfortable with that it's just me and me only, and realizing what I need, and then being able to express that in some way, at least to my heart or my mind, to know to do something. So, you know what? You actually need something healthy to eat. You've been having a lot of sugar and treats and snacks. You actually probably need a good salad, or you need a nap. Like, you need a nap, and what would do wonders for you is just a good half-hour nap or hour nap, or what you need today is some retail therapy, or what you need today is like to actually take some time to cook for your family or that type of thing. And those are for me, those are self kind of healing moments for me when I intentionally choose what I need. And I am filled oftentimes by the loving and the serving. But when there's gathering moments like what you were talking about, because we're natural gatherers, sometimes it's because we just want everyone else to feel a certain way. So when we think about what we intentionally want to feel, and that can still be serving and loving others, but what we want to feel from that like what can actually fill us in our feelings, what fills us and what can we do to tap into that, and I think a lot of it's just being completely honest with what we need and being comfortable being alone with ourselves in the stillness. And sometimes those are meditative moments, sometimes those are prayerful moments, and sometimes those are just thoughts that come into us and be like, you know what, you need a little bit of time on your own, or you need a little break, you need a little sunshine, you need a little walk, whatever it is. I think that's part of the self-care that helps us discover our divine identity, because we're listening to that inner feeling, whatever's in our heart and whatever's in our mind. What is it telling us? What is it we need? And I think when we listen, we do that. So I love that story of Mary and Martha. As you think about those two, those are both amazing women, but what does it look like to stop and consider what it looks like to sit at the Savior's feet and take in whatever he has.
Yeah, fill up your own bucket.
That's right.
Because that's one thing I've seen in some of my friends and in myself is that I enjoy serving others and doing, but I've learned the power in the last 2 years of the word no. Like to listen to myself and be like, you know what, I can't right now. Or the ability to say, I need to be intentional to make sure I'm filling my needs. Yes. Because I think it is a way of showing love and value, like you value you. Because, so I'm going to give you a prime example. One of my things is I get up in the morning and I work for an hour. Then I get my kids up and then I have to get them and myself ready in a short period of time. So usually my hair will go back in a ponytail, throw on the clothes. I make sure they're like cute as can be. And sometimes not even that, but get everybody else ready. And then I go to work and I'm like, I look at myself in the mirror when I go to the bathroom and I'm like, ooh. Yeah. So sometimes taking the extra 10 minutes to put on a little makeup and wash the face really good, do the hair so that you just can feel confident in yourself. Or you have a night where you've had a long day and you just need, you know what, kids, I love you, but mommy's going to go take a 10-minute shower and just decompress and listen to music, read a book, take those moments.
I love that.
And I think there's value in the intentionality. One of the gifts I mentioned earlier that I've worked really hard in my relationship with the Savior and how he views me. And that started because I felt like I wasn't in the scriptures like I had been promised in my patriarchal blessing. And so I was like, okay, I plan out everything. I have this big old planner and I plan out my kids, like they got band practice, therapy, doctor. And I just always worked around them. And I thought, you know what, this is something that I know I need. And so at first it was 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. And the more I did it, the more I wanted. And it was amazing how the time was found because it wasn't there. It was found in those moments. And I think the more that I've allowed myself to do what I need and to vocalize what I need, the more my kids have allowed it, the more I'm able to give in other areas of my life. And I just feel better as a whole, because when you're tired or worn out, you don't have what you need to give to someone else. And then you're not successful in those ways either.
Well, and that there's something, and I didn't come up with this, but you probably heard it. When we say no to something, we're really saying yes to something else. And there's just such power in that thought. If you think through it, when you say no to, I don't know, that person asking you to do the thing that you wish you could do. I mean, our hearts want to help. Like I always say, I wish my heart could do, I wish I could do everything my heart wants to.
Yes.
We of course we want to love and serve and do all we can all the time, but we actually have to say no at some point. And when we say no, we're actually saying yes to something else. And that yes, I think, needs to be us and our families. It just comes down to that. It needs to be what's happening within our home base. And that doesn't mean close off to serving and extending, but family first and ourselves first so that we can give. We have been entrusted, just as you've been entrusted with these girls, to love them and to help them grow and learn all the things. So have I been entrusted. And there's seasons of our lives where we need to consider what our yeses and our nos are, for sure. And I imagine as you get older and as kids move on, we will have practiced saying no still enough to know what we can and can't do, or and we lose energy too. We get older and we lose energy and we don't have the capacity to do. I'm seeing it. I'm feeling it,
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a real conversation and such an important thing to think about. But what is your yes? Is your yes your family and yourself? And I think when you do that, you put yourself in a position to have a reserve. And that reserve, I think, is what you have can give to others, And I feel like once you take care of yourself and you take care of your family, you start to look outward because you're feeling confident with yourself. That self-worth feels so good because you chose your family and yourself first. Then all of a sudden you have the capacity to look outward because you're so confident with what's happening with the choices you've made within yourself and within your family.
Right. And like you said, it's like a reserve. You now have the fuel to give everything that you want to, that your heart is able to, you're not just giving them your scraps, you're giving them your true full self. And I think there's power in that. And the visual that kept coming to my mind was the virgins, the 10 virgins, and how the 5 had their oil because they saved it for what they needed. They took care of it and they replenished it. And so taking care of ourselves, loving ourselves, being intentional with ourselves and our families allows us to, one, love ourselves, become the person that we want to be and the Lord wants us to be, and to be prepared for whatever may come our way in our callings, our friendships, our relationships. It allows us to truly be our best. And
I love that. That's such a good thought with the virgins, the 5 virgins, 5 that were wise and 5 that were foolish. Because if you think about that filling part, I mean, those, like you said, those 5, they had to be vigilant. They had to be thoughtful about keeping their lamps filled. I mean, that doesn't mean they weren't still using their lamps. I'm sure they used their lamps every day, but every day they chose to fill so that they would be prepared and ready. And if you think about those that weren't filled, I mean, they probably just let it go like a lot of us do, like we all do.
We're impulsive and
we all let it go. And then we all of a sudden realize, oh, shoot, I'm empty. But we don't know when the reserve will be needed. So it's a beautiful thought to think about filling daily, as we head through life. I mean, gosh, I love that. Beautiful connection there.
Yeah, that just kind of kept coming to my mind. And I was like, that gives me such a different perspective too. Like I've always used the idea of like filling up your bucket.
Yeah.
And, but we don't know when, it's like with your car, like we do the maintenance, we fill it up with gas. We could be that person that fills it just like every half, like you get halfway. So you always have a reserve.
Yep.
Or we can wait till we're that empty and then get stressed out because there might not be a gas station nearby.
Right.
And that's it. Because we don't know when a national pandemic will happen or when something will happen in our home that we're not prepared for.
Exactly.
And we might be needed to be that for somebody else.
Oh, I love that so much.
And so I love that. I am so grateful for our discussion that we've had. I feel like you mentioned earlier, women need women. And I think that we benefit from I'm a big advocate of relationships as a whole. I think that we're meant to be with people, but I think that there's something in women where we draw from each other. We draw strength, we draw knowledge, we draw grace, and we uplift and we help replenish each other. And I think that's like, I feel so enthused after today's discussion. And I hope that everyone listening may be reminded, one, of the value of you, that you are a beautiful, amazing child of God, that your Father in heaven loves you, that you have a purpose that is so much bigger than what you probably even know right now. You bring something to this world in your uniqueness. I know, Katie, I've seen it in you, and I'm seeing it in myself. Like, you and I each are discovering who we are through time. And the more that we do, the more others like draw from that, because we're becoming. And so don't expect it. I hope everybody gives themselves grace, not expecting themselves to be perfect today.
Yeah.
That it is a journey, and that be intentional, that you matter enough that you can fill those reserves and be the person, the wife, the mother, the coworker, the sister, the daughter, the son, the father of that you want to be. And I think that's the key. And the other thing I want to say that I've learned in self-love is going to my Father in heaven. If there's something that I want in my life, or that I want to develop, I remember on my mission, a woman told me that she wanted a gift, and that she's learned that our God is a God who is bound, that he's willing to be bound. And that if we go to him with an intentional heart and ask kindly and have a righteous desire, he might not always agree, but that if we're willing to ask, and he will help us develop and become not only what he wants, but also what we want. And I think that that's important, is that your perspectives and how you view yourself is important. And if you're struggling in that area, we can pray and ask him, and the Spirit will guide us in that process.
I love that. I think one last thought that I had to add is, if you haven't had a chance to ask Heavenly Father how he feels about you, I just recommend doing that. If you just really are unsure and don't know where you sit or where you stand or what your purpose is and your plan, I think, or how he feels about you, I think it's pretty awesome to have an experience and trust that he will help you feel. May not feel in that exact moment, but he will show you. He will show you, and trusting that he will show you through others, through yourself. He will send others to teach you and remind you, and he'll send feelings and thoughts and impressions that remind you who you are.
Very true. Well, I love you, Katie. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so grateful for our talk. So everyone, have a great week this week. And we hope that these words will open up each of your hearts and minds to seeing just what a beautiful gift that each of you are in this world, and how needed you are in not only your home, but in the world as a whole, and in our Father in Heaven's plan. So have a great week.
I hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please leave me a review wherever you are listening. And if you could, I'd love it if you would share this episode with friends and others who might be interested in this topic. I look forward to having you join me in 2 weeks for the next one. The easiest way to know when I have a new episode is to subscribe, so go over there and click that button. Until that time, please get in touch. I love hearing feedback and getting to know my listeners. Seriously, it is like making new friends. You can get in touch by visiting my website at letyourheartgrow.com, where you can leave comments or stop by my social media accounts. Come chat. Let me know what topics you would like to see covered in future episodes, and let me get to know you better. Thanks again.
And we'll see you soon.